These are two paintings by David, and there's numerous other paintings in this room by David. He was a very important court painter at the time of Napoleon. Here we see Napoleon in all his glory. He's crowning Josephine. He's just been crowned as the Emperor of France. He was a grandiose man, wasn't he? And in fact, he crowned himself. And in the original sketch for this painting, David was going to paint that moment, but it just seemed a little bit too overboard. So instead, he put this more graceful moment of the ceremony where Napoleon is crowning his wife, Josephine. And this was taking place inside Notre Dame Cathedral. There's an exact copy of this painting out at Versailles. And in the background is all the royal court, all the important personages. Here we've got David also. In this case, it's the Rape of the Sabines, which we told you about back in Rome. The Rape of the Sabines was an event that happened about 500 BC, and it was a skirmish between the little Roman village and its neighboring village of the Sabines. It was the first expansion of the Roman Empire, way back 500, 600 BC. So they attacked their neighbors. The Romans stole the women, took them home, made them their wives. The men from the Sabines came to fight the Romans, and the women interceded and made peace. And with that, Rome took its first step on the road to world conquest, the Rape of the Sabines. And there you see very clearly the lady in the front bringing the sides together. Women as peacemakers, men as warriors. Now we're looking at the Winged Victory of Samothrace. This is classical Greek sculpture at its best. And you can see how graceful she is. Even though she weighs several tons of marble, it looks like she's about to take off. Stepping forward into the wind on the prow of a ship. Her hands are missing, the head is gone, but you don't need the whole body there for enjoying one of the most beautiful works of art that was ever created. And this was done 2,500 years ago. The Venus de Milo, the archetype of female beauty from ancient Greece. And this too is a classical Greek statue from about the 4th century BC. The arms are missing, but that's okay because it's still a perfect piece, the personification of the ideal form of female beauty. You can see this graceful fabric that's just wrapped around her hips in a spiral. It almost leads you, the spiral of the fabric leads you right around the piece, so you can walk around all 360 degrees and enjoy a good look at it. We're stopping here for just a minute. This is a little corner of Spanish paintings. There's a Spanish gallery that's way far, far away at the end of the museum that we're not going to go to. But here we've got some Ribera and Murillo, and over here El Greco, a marvelous crucifix by El Greco. And again, a fantastic ceiling. So this is one of the great masterpieces in the history of art. Vermeer is just one of the finest painters who ever came across the planet. And you can see this rich sense of realism, this wonderful feeling of space and depth. The foreground is coming right out at us. There's always the same scenario with Vermeer. It's always something going on in a room with the light coming in from the left side. That was his studio. And you always have this feeling of quiet and calm and peacefulness, and yet there's always something going on beneath the surface. Now in this case we have an astronomer, a geographer, and he's looking at a map of the globe, of the heavens. And this shows Amsterdam's place in the world. Remember, this is the golden age of Holland and Delft. He was from Delft. And little Amsterdam had colonized the New World. They had this brief period, and Indonesia. They had the spice trade going. They had settled in New York. So here is this Dutchman looking at the world. He's got the world in his hand. And on the background, look at the background. There's paintings hanging on the wall. You'll see shadows in the background. Perhaps there's a couple of nails half banged into the wall that you can see. And he loved this use of blue fabric as well. So get in close and appreciate it. And then over here where Charlie's looking is the Lace Maker, another masterpiece by Vermeer. So in this museum we have 2 Vermeers. At the Metropolitan in New York there's 4 Vermeers. At the Frick there's 4 Vermeers. And that's about half the known Vermeers in the world. This is the Van Eyck, it's called the Chancellor Ronin and the Madonna. And the fellow on the left is the Chancellor. He paid for the painting. He was really in control of a large part of France. So he's a very important character. And look at the exquisite detail in the vast background. You can see people about a mile away. You can see people on the bridge 2 miles away. Look at the detail of the crown that's being held over the Madonna. And you see the perspective, how the tiles at the very front, bottom edge of the painting set up the foreground, and then they just lead your eye way back into the distant landscape. Charles I. Van Dyck was a court painter in London, and he was brought to London by the king, King Charles. And you see him painted here in all of his noble grandeur. He's very, just looking at the painting, you can tell he's a pretty arrogant guy, isn't he? Very haughty, very snobby, holier than thou. And you all know what happened to Charles I? Off with his head. That was the English Revolution, the Glorious Revolution. So we're going on now to a room filled with Rembrandts. Rembrandt, one of the most famous names in the history of art. And in this room it's quite interesting because they're all by Rembrandt, including a number of his self-portraits. You see Rembrandt as a young man over here, and then we see him as a much older painter over on this side, and here in his middle age. Rembrandt did a series of self-portraits throughout his career, probably 60 or 70 self-portraits. So it's the finest record in the history of art of the aging of an artist, the self-portraiture of an artist. He's famous for his Rembrandt lighting. It's even named after him now, where you have the light coming in from one side, almost like a modern studio photography gallery likes to do, with a slight shadow on the other side and a darker background. And this creates that real three-dimensional sense of space and feeling of reality. And over here we have Rembrandt painting another kind of subject matter. It's the Queen of Sheba taking a bath. And they say that his wife was the model for that painting. Rembrandt's career was really wild and stormy and very long, and he went through many ups and downs. He lived in Amsterdam and sold many paintings in his lifetime. He was a well-respected painter, but he was always broke. I guess he lived pretty high. He was always spending, a lot of children, always moving from one house to another. This is the apartments of Napoleon III, about 5 rooms in this wing, and he didn't actually live in here. This was for official receptions, and this was the grand salon and the grand chandelier in the middle of it all. What a room. This is like beyond anything even that's in Versailles, except for the Hall of Mirrors. But this is the most concentrated piece of decorative arts that I've ever experienced. Even after all of the churches and ceilings that we've seen and other places, this beats them all, I think. What a fabulous room. And the funny story about it is that this was not open to the public until just a few years ago. This whole wing that we've been walking through was the offices of the Ministry of Finance.
No kidding.
This was their private dining room we're about to see. They occupied this wing of the museum for 100 years, and they refused to move out. Finally, the government had to basically bribe them by building them a brand new, beautiful offices out on the edge of town somewhere. And once that was all finished and met their specifications, they finally begrudgingly moved out of the Louvre. And then the museum came in and rebuilt it all, and that's been going on the last 10 years. And now it's all open for us to enjoy.
And that's our highlights of the Louvre. Of course, there are more things to see in this great museum. It's the world's largest art museum.